Hi, my name is Taylor Smurl, and welcome back to Cosplay and Cocktails. On every episode of this show, I bring to the table a different anime, comic book, TV show, what have you. I do a cosplay inspired by it, and I make you a cocktail to go along with it. This week, if you hadn't figured out already, we're talking about Death Parade. Everybody, put your hands up. It's got the most upbeat, happy opening of any anime ever, and then the whole thing's just about death and dying. Love it, yes, good, we love it. So Death Parade is a 12 episode anime that was released in 2015. It was done by Madhouse, and it was directed and produced by Yuzuru Tachikawa. Now, Death Parade is set in the afterlife, which is envisioned as a fancy cocktail bar where bartenders / arbiters greet the recently deceased, force them to play bar games that are increasingly stressful and often painful in order to draw out the patron's true self and judge their souls accordingly. So you got murder darts and well, it's pool where you're dead, and uncomfortable bowling. Anyway, the point of these games is you reveal yourself, and then these bartenders can decide if your soul is granted the gift of reincarnation or tossed into the void. I feel like this is a very bad idea. I just having known a lot of bartenders, they can be very judgmental people, you know? You just come in and you're like, hey, you guys make a mojito? Into the void. Can I have a Long Island iced tea? Immortal damnation for you, sir. Do you have any blender drinks? Gone. Don't let bartenders judge your immortal soul. Now, the story focuses around Dekim. That is who I am cosplaying today. He is one of the main arbiters, and he's unique in that he has the possible capacity for human emotion. I, too, have the possible capacity for human emotion, given certain circumstances, so I relate. And the story also focuses on his assistant, this sort of mysterious human soul girl named Yuki, who we don't quite get her story up front. And there's a whole fun cast of characters that sort of staff this afterlife bar complex. There's this happy elevator boy and Mr. Angry Eyebrows and this terribly small, terribly powerful woman. I think God's there, and he's a total jerk, but to the surprise of nobody. And along with the core cast, there's sort of a revolving door of the recently deceased, sort of like a villain of the day trope, but instead of villain, it's deeply depressing lost soul of the day. Jack, wait, what are you in the afterlife? You can only be in the show if you wear cosplay, you know that. So, bit of a spoiler warning, I'm gonna give some things away about the end of the show, but also definitely a content warning. While I do think Death Parade is a very good anime, I think it's very beautiful, it deals with some heavy stuff. You're talking about, obviously, death, murder, the severe depression, the loss of life at one's own hand, trying to avoid the algorithm there. Yeah, I'm not going to go too hard into that stuff, but I do want to warn you, if you do check out the anime, and also if you're sensitive, even for this video alone, give you a moment to click away. Whenever I'm sad, I Google birds with arms, so here's some birds with arms, just give you a little buffer. You can make up your mind if you want to stick with me on this video, birds with arms. Alright, cool. Now, the question at the core of Death Parade is whether or not these arbiters that have never lived a human life, these just sort of afterworld dummies, can actually properly judge a human life. And if making people play super stressful death games is really revealing their best self as far as judging them for reincarnation or not. And that question sort of more deeply explored as Dekim learns the past of his at first nameless assistant, the human life she led, and the pain that she dealt with. The show as a whole is really just a beautiful meditation on the brevity of life, but also the beauty of it. That's some heavy stuff. I could use a drink. How about you? Let's get to the drinky part. All right, so for an anime set entirely in a bar, there is a not as much drink making as you think. For the bulk of the episodes, the only thing we see served to the customers is actually water, which I'd like to take as like a symbolic thing. You know, if you know bar superstition, you know you're not supposed to toast water because water is associated with the afterworld, the river Styx. Toasting water is bad etiquette because it's basically inviting death upon your fellow toasties. Just, you know, bad manners, bad manners. I also think it's funny that this setup is we need you to reveal your true self so we can properly judge you. Alcohol is right there. I don't need to make a man bowl with a human heart to know his true self. I can just serve him like 4 particularly strong rum and cokes and he's gonna be telling me where he buried the bodies. I guess it's not like as cinematic to just have a guy like throw back some shots of tequila and be like, here's why I'm a bad dude. But you know, it does seem kind of funny. Like in vino verita. No. In wine there is truth. I guess there's also truth in murder darts. All right. But towards the end of the series, we do get an actual cocktail made. We see a little bit how it's made. We get a name and we get a presentation. So that is the drink that I'm going to try to unlock. I'm kind of excited about this because this is sort of like there's that new cooking show that's like Cooking Crime Scene or whatever, where like chefs have to go into a kitchen and figure out what was baked there. This is kind of the same thing. I have to look at the evidence and I have to recreate what might be in that glass. Now, the drink that Decim serves is called a Memento Mori. Totally badass name. That means remember death. So we've got a badass name, but the visual is this. So it's a blue martini. I'm working with the blue martini. Let's look at the evidence we have as to what this drink could be. Now, first off, we know that Decim has to be a good bartender. I mean, several of the other underworld purgatory bar staff comment on his ability to make a good drink, and I'm gonna guess if you've been drinking in cocktail bars for like an eternity, you'd know a good drink when you see one. You'd have a pretty good palate. So I would say that we can assume that this is going to be a drink based on a classic respectable structure. Evidence piece number 2 is we see him shake this drink. So that's sort of only so many drinks are classically shaken out there. Evidence piece number 3 obviously is the visual itself. Now, a couple things we can discern from this. First off, it's in a martini glass. Now, it's not always true that a drink served in a glass like this has to be a martini, but I think in this case, it's probably a pretty good indication that we're dealing with a martini structure. The second thing that kind of backs that up is that it's clear. So most cocktails that we shake because there's acid involved. There's some sort of citrus, lemon or lime juice. We want to aerate those acids. But if you have any sort of juice present in a cocktail, if you shake it, you're not going to get this level of clarity. So we know it's a pretty spirit central drink that we're shaking. And then of course, the obvious thing to think about here is the color. It's blue. It's super blue. It's pool blue. Not a lot of things make drinks look like that. In fact, I'd say there's really only one ingredient that does. That's Blue Curacao. Basically, it's just orange liqueur that is colored with blue food coloring. Came about when people wanted super aesthetic, oceany blue drinks along with the tiki craze and just kind of stuck around. It's a bit of a maligned ingredient in Western bartending to a certain extent, you know. I don't think we really associate it with classic cocktails, but that's not as much true in Japanese bartending. One kind of godfather of Japanese bartending I'm thinking of is Kazuo Ueda. He has this great book called Cocktail Techniques, and he talks about using like very small portions of Blue Curacao or Midori or Campari to get a really bright color effect. And then he'll balance out, if it's, you know, sweetness that brings to a drink, he'll balance that out with other ingredients so that the aesthetics of a drink are just as important as everything else in that glass. So now that we've kind of looked at the evidence, I would say that this is some sort of shaken martini variety. Shaken martinis, while not traditional martinis were gin. We have Ian Fleming and James Bond largely to thank for the shaken, not stirred thing. It's fine if you like it that way. I used to be more of a stickler for like a pure stirred gin martini. Nowadays, not so much. I think that there's always a time and place for a super cold, like shaken martini. And one martini that is traditionally shaken also comes from Ian Fleming, also comes from James Bond. That's the Vesper martini. The Vesper Martini is a combination of gin, vodka, and Lillet. Now, Lillet is an aromatized wine that is fortified with orange liqueur. So, what I'm going to make for this drink is sort of a reworked Vesper with our Blue Curacao. It's going to be offset by some vermouth and then some base spirits. So that's sort of where we're going with this. So all that being said, let's make a drink. I'm going to start in my shaker tin with just a 1/4 ounce of Blue Curacao. That sounds like a very small amount, but trust me, that little bit is going to give us all the color we need. To sort of mimic the softness that you get from Lillet in a Vesper, I'm going to use Dolin Blanc. Dolin Blanc is a sweeter white vermouth than a dry vermouth. It's just going to have a little bit of a lighter floral quality to it that's going to mimic that sort of Lillet aspect of a Vesper. Some people like a heavier pour of vermouth than others. I certainly do. So I'm going to use 3/4 ounce of vermouth for this. Just going to line the ingredients up here as a little barrier between you and me. No, I just I like that they do that. If you've ever been to a Japanese cocktail bar, they put the bottles in front of you as they kind of make it, so you can see what's happening. All right, and for my split base, traditional Vesper is vodka and gin. I'm going to use gin for sure. I'm actually using Death's Door gin. Thematically appropriate, but also one that I really like because it's very savory. It's got a lot of coriander and fennel along with the juniper. And then I'm going to offset that with, instead of vodka, I'm going to use some shochu. So traditional Japanese spirit. This one happens to be distilled 100% from rice. I also thought it fit thematically because it's shiro, which means white. White is a color associated with the death shroud in Japan. So we've just got all of our deathy spirits here. Spirits, ghosts. I don't know. There's something there. I'm going to use an ounce of shochu and an ounce and a half of gin. And I'm also going to add a few dashes of orange bitters. Lillet is fortified with both sweet and bitter orange, so I want to bring in a little bit of bitterness just to give some structure to this drink. All right, now let's ice up our tin and shake it up. Gonna boop that cherry down into the glass. I love that inclusion of the bright red toxic maraschino cherry. I don't know. Some bartenders really hate on them, and I know they're fake. We literally did a history about how fake those are, but I love them. All right, here we go. Very, very much our clear, very pool blue. You can see that just that 1/4 ounce of Blue Curacao is all we need. Here's our Memento Mori. Cheers. Yeah, that's nice. It's not deeply boozy. It's very floral. It's very light. It's not super sweet. It's got a nice dryness to it. Just a really nice, soft martini. You could do, if you like a boozier martini, I think you could up the gin on this a little bit, but I'm happy with this. So here we go. Now that I have a drink in front of me, let's talk philosophy. I'm a trans person on YouTube. That's what we do, right? No, but I want to talk a bit about the name of the cocktail from the show. They call this drink the Memento Mori, and that's not just a cool Latin phrase. I mean, it is. It means remember death, and that's metal as fuck. But also, it's a whole concept in religion, art, music, dance, and philosophy. It really goes back to the origins of philosophy itself. I mean, you have Plato ruminating on death in his Phaedo is sort of like the reflections on the soul, that like all philosophy is really about death and dying. I could have used that as like a short answer for the philosophy class I did really bad in college. It's like, what's the existentialism really about? Probably death. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but that cigar is probably about death. Dead turtles all the way down. You know, in the religious sense, you have like Christianity embracing it as sort of a way to remind its followers that, like, you know, earthly delights are fleeting, and to remember your eternal judgment that is to come. I mean, think about like Ash Wednesday. They smear the goop on your head and they say, you were dust and you're going to be dust again. They don't say exactly that, but it's close. Sin is momentary. Damnation is forever. It sounds like a catchphrase for a cologne. You know, there's a massive meditation in Buddhism on death. I think that if you want to assume a religious influence on this anime, I would assume Buddhism, just because of the sort of mandala shapes that are previewed throughout it. There's the lotus flower on Oculus's beard. And in Buddhism, it's taken in a bit less of a, like, be worried about damnation, and more of a, it's an injustice to life to take it for granted. You know, like the Buddhist meditations are like the Maranasati, where, you know, you want to be able to be active and alive in every moment of your life, or you are somehow disrespecting that life. It's a really intense concept, but I dig it. And of course, in the art world, you have this concept super popular in like the Middle and Victorian ages. You have like the Dutch vanitas, these paintings that would have like still lives of skulls and wilting flowers and candles about to be burned out, you know, sort of ruminating on the eventual decay and brevity of life. You have depictions of like the dance macabre, which are like these figures of the Grim Reaper dancing with, you know, the recently deceased or skeletons, sort of reminding you that no matter what station you come from, we all dance with death in the end. Everybody, put your hands up. I think that you could probably call the intro to Death Parade a bit of a dance macabre. Now, while the nuances of the interpretation of Memento Mori vary from religion to religion and art form to art form, I happen to like most the idea that it's not about making you afraid of death, but make you appreciate life. You know, it makes you wake up and say, yo, I'm alive right now, right now, out there, you watching this, you're alive. This is fleeting. This is momentary. I mean, I hope you're alive. Yeah, not that there's any problem if you're not, that's bad for you. I guess it's kind of bad for me too, because an audience full of ghosts is gonna do nothing but boo. Should I? I'm just gonna. I can't stand up. You'll see that I'm not wearing pants. Now, I say all this to say that I think that the name of the cocktail, Memento Mori, isn't just a cool name. It isn't just a reference to a specific art form. I think it's really cluing us into how you can read this anime on the whole. I think you could view this anime as a Memento Mori. You know, it's here to remind us of how we live our lives. And, you know, the judgments that are passed by the arbiters in the end, they're not about these sort of Western ideas of morality, but more about if you lived your life to the fullest. I mean, Dekim says several times that he respects a life well lived, that is a good life. It's not about sin or decadence or whatever. It's just, did you have fun while you were up there? And that's really the freedom that we get from this interpretation of Memento Mori. It's to be alive in the moments that we're alive, and that through that there's a sort of freedom we achieve. We remember that it is so momentary, that all the time spent worried about what you might or might not have, none of that really matters in the end. I mean, as French philosopher Albert Camus said, come to terms with death, after which anything is possible. Or German philosopher Kim Petra said, not everybody wins, but everybody tries. Not everybody lives, but everybody dies. Is like a modern take on Memento Mori, YOLO. You know, I would be remiss to not mention, there is also one fun Easter egg in this anime, and Madhouse also produced Death Note along with Death Parade, and towards the end of one of the episodes, a human soul is given the option to rescue her love interest, but she has to sacrifice a random stranger. Now, the stranger looks like this guy. So if you haven't seen Death Note, this character looks quite intensely like Light from Death Note, and it's like an Easter egg. It's not like a full, this is a continuation of the universe thing, but it is a purposeful inclusion of a character that looks like him. Because, as you know, through the Death Note mechanics, because he used the Death Note, he can neither go to heaven nor hell. Which, you know, that was like the one like comfort for me, because I did not like this character in the anime. I was a fan of L. L was my boy, of what he did to my boy. But at least we knew that Light would not have an afterlife that was pleasant. And then here we get Death Parade saying, oh, what's Light's eternal servitude? Just sitting at a sweet-ass cocktail bar. You just got to be like a super judgmental edgelord jerkwad, and then in your afterlife you just get to sit around sitting like good-ass sidecars for an eternity. Like, that doesn't seem fair. Like, that would be my ideal afterlife, honestly. Anyway. So Death Parade is a beautiful, resonant, difficult anime. I recommend Death Parade if any of the themes I've talked about don't scare you away from it. And if nothing else, I recommend this drink. Despite appearances, it's actually pretty good. You know, now that we've discussed the idea of Memento Mori, I actually kind of love this drink as representing it. Because, I mean, you only live once. You might as well drink all those silly-ass blue drinks. You know you want to. You always wanted to. I always want to. As always, thank you for joining me here. If you have suggestions for episodes that you would like to see, doesn't just have to be anime, video games, TV shows, comic books. Let me know what you would love to see a drink made out of. If there is a drink in media that you have been curious about what it might be. I really enjoyed this, trying to figure out what this guy was, so I'd be happy to do that again for you. The recipe for my take on the Memento Mori will be down below. Hey, thank you for joining me here on Cosplay and Cocktails. I'll be back sooner than you think. Actually, I've got an actual recording schedule for these now, so hey, let's see how I do. Thank you for those of you that are supporting us, and thank you just for watching. This is definitely a passion project before anything else, and I'm really happy to have an audience for it. So thank you very much. I have been Taylor Smurl, and this has been Cosplay and Cocktails. Everybody, put your hands up.